So, as I said, welcome. Could you please turn off your audios? You're welcome to leave your video on, but please turn off your audios for the time being. And I'd like to welcome you. And Brian Garris, our board president, would you like to say a couple of words?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Garris, project manager, principal with Milestone Construction, also the current president of Plan New Hampshire. Just wanted to welcome everybody this morning. Looking forward to a great virtual town hall, get to reconnect with everybody, and looking forward to a good event. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. For all of you, if you, at the top of your screen where you see all the people, there should be 4 little icons over on the left. The second one in from the left, if you click on that, it says speaker view, then you can see just one square and that's the person speaking. So, or it should be anyway. So very good. Thank you. So again, welcome to our virtual town hall. This is a chance for us to share with you what we're up to and for us to hear from you what you'd like us to be up to. So first of all, let's meet the board. Amanda Savage, do you want to introduce the board?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Amanda Savage. As Brian's already been introduced earlier, he sits on our board as the president of the board, and I myself, I'm a business development manager at North Branch Construction, and I assist Brian and the rest of the board and Robin as the vice president of the board. But also we have Kelly DeMore from Nathan Wexler, who has graciously been serving on the board as our treasurer, and Caroline Corvo serving as our secretary from Warren Street Architects. So all of us have been really enthusiastic this year about, turning the page for 2021, positioning ourselves as trying to offer more virtual events as typically we would be in person. But I'd also like to give a shout out to the rest of our board who's also been volunteering on many committees, whether they're chairing a committee or contributing their time and expertise in consulting Plan New Hampshire. So to begin, we have Bob White from GPI, North Sturdivant from JSA, Stephanie, who is behind the scenes of many of our virtual events as our marketing committee chair from Crotto Consulting, Jim Harrison from Cross Insurance, Brian Pratt from Fuss & O'Neill, Jamie Simchik from Simchik Planning and Development. Also, he serves as the chair of the Charettes Committee. Jody Nazaka from the City of Manchester, and Bruce Hamilton, Bruce BRH Architects. Heather Rowan, who serves as our program committee chair from Stone Source. Nick Coates from the town of Bristol, Chris Nadeau from Novus Engineering, Bill Hickey from HL Turner, Derek Lick from Sellaway and Hollis, Chris Solomon from Salmon Delia, Joe Schumacher from the state of New Hampshire Office of Professional Licensing. So thanks everyone for coming today and joining us. I'm looking forward to hearing from Robin about looking back at 2020 and then looking forward at 2021. Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, Amanda. So for those of you who don't know Plan New Hampshire, and for those of you who do, this is a reminder. Plan has a vision of healthy and vibrant communities across the state. And so what are vibrant communities? Those are ones where people want to be, right? And where you go into a community and you see people being active, or there's a lot going on. And vibrant communities means a lot to different people. And certainly a vibrant community in Sandwich would be different from Hanover or from Newmarket or from Nashua or Manchester. But from small towns to big towns, there are ways to be vibrant. And our mission is to foster excellence in planning and design and development of New Hampshire's built environment. So our mission to achieve the vision of vibrant, healthy and vibrant communities is through the lens of the built environment. So, and our strategy to do that is to share information and inspiration for how community design and the built environment can contribute positively to where we live, work, and play. So that's really our strategy. And we do that in a lot of different ways. Last year, we had no idea a year ago that all of this was coming. And in March, we realized that we really needed to really shift how we did things. And we went virtual. As many of you know, we saw many of you last year in our webinars. We did 5 webinars last year, which is more than we usually do for workshops. We had 3 related to the effects of the pandemic on the built environment, and we had 2 on a new theme that we're really fostering here called belonging by design. And that's really thinking about how our design is including people that may not otherwise be included or thought about. So, and you'll be hearing more about that in the months to come, but belonging by design is a theme that, that we'd like to work on. We also had what we call 3 Hawk Talks, and those were named for one of our former board members and a good friend and mentor of mine, Roger Hawk, who passed away 4 years ago. And these are shorter talks. We couldn't call them TED Talks, so we call them Hawk Talks. And our first one was on air quality and learning about air quality during the pandemic. We also talked about office space, and the last one was Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a planning tool. So you can see that there are a lot of different ways to think about how community design in the built environment can impact a community, and so we look at it in different ways and try to think of things that would be interesting and useful to all of you. Our annual Merit Awards event was also virtual last year, and you can see the recording of that on our website as well. For golf, we have an annual golf event, and we did manage to have it in person. We had an almost record number of players, and it was an extremely successful event. So 2020 was a very busy year. It was probably the busiest year that we've had. We did have a couple of Charettes that were scheduled, but they did get postponed because of the pandemic, and we were still not quite sure how to approach them. So we just, with the town, said, let's postpone, and we said that was fine. We were all still trying to figure things out. Meanwhile, throughout all of that, our membership renewals and our new members, the numbers were about normal as they were. We took advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program, and that got forgiven. So we were able to get some funds in to pay for payroll for a few weeks. We also had what were called NERF funds, and these were nonprofit emergency relief funds that was part of the CARES Act. And in New Hampshire, it was brilliant because they took that CARES money and set aside a big chunk of it just for nonprofits. And we were able to get over $20,000 to add to our operating fund. So that helped get us through. We also had, and it was forgiven, we also had our best year ever for donations. There are 2 huge fundraising drives that Plan New Hampshire participates in. One is New Hampshire Gives, which is a statewide one. It's always in June. We had our best year ever last year. And Giving Tuesday is a national one. The Tuesday after Thanksgiving, we also had our best year ever. Amanda, I think you wanted to make a comment about this.
Absolutely. So we were able to survive 2020 with a lot of these programs, as Robin mentioned. We're unsure as to how those programs are going to roll out with 2021. We're very hopeful to get some of the assistance, and many of this assistance helps our operating costs. It helps, with payroll for Robin. It helps us provide excellent programming. And so I have to put a plug in as the membership, for the membership to say, your membership really helps us. Your renewals or new memberships also really helps us. And I hate to sound like this, but, with the sponsorship committee, sponsoring our virtual events really does help us out. And we're hopeful to continue with this, that we've been very successful with donations, like Robin mentioned. But just wanted to put it out there that how much it really means for us to continue with our operations. And so we hope that you will continue with 2021 on that. So
thank you, Amanda. Yes, and that really underscores that we are an independent organization. We're not part of any national umbrella organization. We're independent, and we have a very small budget. Every penny is accounted for, and every single dollar that comes in really means a lot to us. So thank you, Amanda. Really appreciate that. So going ahead for this year, we had our first, we traditionally have networking events 3 or 4 times a year. We weren't able to do it last year, but we did do our first one this year virtually. It was called Plug In with Plan New Hampshire. It was in January and it was very successful. A lot of you that are here today were actually there in January. And so it was great. It's just a networking event. We chatted a little bit about what we're doing and we broke into small groups, I think 3 times. So people got a chance to meet other people just as you would have if it had been in person. And then come back together and chat for a few minutes in a group and then go back into small groups. It was fun. And it was a good way to end that day. I believe it was a Thursday in January. And we do plan to do another one at some point this year. We're also planning, as many of you may know, and if you've read the newsletters for Save the Dates, they haven't all been out yet, but we're planning 3 webinars. The first one is in March, on March 23rd, outdoor dining. This is outdoor dining lessons learned. We're going to hear from Nashua and Bristol and Access Navigators, who was working in Portsmouth, to talk about lessons learned from outdoor dining. And so what did Nashua learn from, what did they do and what did they learn from it? What did Bristol do, a smaller town, and what did they learn from it? And then we're also going to have Ann Weidman from Access Navigators is going to talk about looking at outdoor dining. She used in Portsmouth because that's where she was, but this is applicable almost anywhere, is things to think about to make these spaces accessible. In April, we're going to do Pop-Ups 101. What is a pop-up? Pop-up dining is really what we had, right? And we've had pop-up parklets. We have pop-ups in storefronts, and a lot of people may have empty storefronts now. So how can we use those in a pop-up venue? And so that's going to be in April, and that'll be a really fun one. And then in May, we're coming back to Belonging by Design, and we have a woman, Talmyra Hill, is going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how it's related to the built environment. So how the built environment can think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our planning and design of what we're up to. We are actually, Tilton and Wolfboro both came back to us and said, we want to do our Charettes. How can we do it and do it safely? And so we are in discussions with each one of them. Tilton is looking like it's going to be in June. Nothing is signed yet. And Wolfboro, we're still looking at for the fall. How can we do this and how can we do it safely? Traditionally, our Charettes are in person, but we're realizing that even if we go back to in person and doing it the way we used to, we have all learned so much about how much technology like this Zoom can enhance the whole process and bring more people in that might not otherwise be able to participate. So we're taking a look at that and how our Charette, how the Charette process can be enhanced with all of this. In Tilton, we would be looking at the downtown and making it a little more appealing and a little more walkable. And also in Wolfboro, we're going to look at a certain neighborhood, not the waterfront, but in back of Town Hall. There's a really nice old neighborhood there, and they are also looking, how can we make this a little more appealing and spruce it up and then make connections between that neighborhood and some playing fields down and back and some other places right around it. So that'll be a real fun one. And again, this is all design. These are all done by the towns came to us with applications, and the leaders of each of the Charettes will pull together a team based on what's needed. Always landscape architects are needed, but historic preservationists and people like that, sometimes engineers are needed to really make recommendations, and it's all on a volunteer basis. And our Charette page on our website can give you more information about that. We are also having our annual golf event again. It will be in October. We haven't signed anything, and the committee hasn't made an actual determination to say, yes, this is where we're going to be. We've been in Canterbury the last 3 years, and whether we're going to stay there or move, we're 99% to a decision, but it hasn't been made yet, so I can't announce it yet. But stay tuned for that. This is always a really fun event. It's small. There's about 100 players. And it's nice because there's always people to meet, but you're with people that you know. And last year we did it. It was very safe, very, and it was a lot of fun, even though we couldn't all get together afterward, but we're hoping that we can this year because it's going to be in October. And if anyone's interested in participating on the golf committee to make it happen, please let us know, because we'd be more than happy to have you be part of it. So that's an awful lot that I just put out to you. And so now we'd like to know what your thoughts are. What's coming up for you and what would you like to see from Plan New Hampshire? So what we're going to do now is we're going to break you into small groups. So there are 30 of you here. So I think I'll break you into 10 groups of 3. And I'll give you 10 or 15 minutes to to introduce yourselves. And then designate one of you to be the scribe or a note taker or whatever, and talk about what you'd like to see from Plan New Hampshire, more of the same or not, and some other ideas. And so write those down. And then when you come back in the big group in 10 or 15 minutes, then we'll talk about some of the ideas that you had and we'll ask you to share them with us. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. So, okay, so what was the question is, what else would you like to see? What came up for you? And what else could Plan be doing for you? Anybody want to start? Anybody have anything they want to toss out there that we can talk about? Miss Heather, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hi, Katie May and I were put in a room number 10. And with her efforts and studies on the Charette program, that was kind of where our focus of topic came. And she has come up with the greatest idea. We do such a great job on our Charette programs. We hand them off to the towns and that's it. There's really not a lot of follow-up per se later on down the road. And she's come up with a great idea to create some kind of networking event where people who have been involved in the Charettes come together, people who are considering doing a charrette come together and share information, have breakout rooms with specific subjects, ideas or issues, and have that kind of set up ahead of time, just to be able to share the information. And whether it's somebody, even if you're putting somebody from Portsmouth in a room with somebody from Littleton, where the towns are so different, there still could be a connection made with an issue or a subject or a positive or a takeaway that somebody could share from their charrette experience in their town to somebody who's considering it. And it's just the value that that would provide from the history of our charrette program, I think would be invaluable. So I thought, Katie, that was a fantastic idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie May. Katie May is awesome. Katie May, just for all of you to know, where is Katie May? She's somewhere in here. There she is. Katie May is doing a capstone project, taking a look at our charrette program for the last 10 years and going back and taking a look to see what's happened since then. And is there anything we could be doing differently and some other things? So this is really great information for us. I think that's a great idea to be able to do that. Now that we have a bigger board and lots more volunteers, we may be able to pull that off at some point. So that's great. Thanks, Katie May. Anybody have any comments about that they want to add?
I would commend it emphatically. I participated 2 years ago in the Hillsborough charrette, and subsequent to the charrette, that's a big spin on the flywheel, a big weekend. There was an effort. I live in the next town over in Henniker, so I'm kind of, I didn't go rogue. I went kind of native. They made an effort to get together their individual groups, the Chamber, the Rotary, Hillsborough Reborn, and the like, and follow up on the findings of the charrette and the charrette report. And there is a gap between the charrette and when the report comes out. So things happen. Unfortunately, Hillsborough kind of got blown out of the saddle by the coronavirus. And I think that's happened elsewhere. Yeah. But there was no real, Stephen Mino was there on a different basis. Other than the fact that I happened to be there from the next town, the charrette people were no longer present. in those groups
Mm.
as they met. And after all the professional input, the towns, it seems, can kind of wallow a little bit.
Yeah. It varies town to town as to what the talent is and so forth. So thanks, Rob. Thanks. Who had another idea they want to share with the group and with us? Matt LaRue, unmute yourself.
All right, so I was with Beverly Donovan, and we had kind of two main points that we came away from. Beverly brought up pro forma development and just education on the total cost of development from planning to implementation. Kind of we talked about like economies of scale, density, lot sizes, and helping people to understand what the cost is and why certain things can and can't be done. And then sort of broader on that is just general toolkits for town boards, like zoning and planning boards, to get collaboration and to get access to more modern planning resources. I know particularly in my town and probably a lot of other towns, a lot of the boards are people that have been there for a long time. So it would be great to bring in more modern resources.
That's a great idea. Actually, OSI, the Office of Strategic Initiatives, is working on that. And there's a lot going on there to bring boards, bring them more training sessions, short and sweet, things that they need to know. Also for older boards too, because, and as you all know, many of our towns, the planning board and the select board are the same people who have been there for 30 plus years. And because they've been doing things the same way over and over, and yeah, they know how to do what they're doing, but there's other ways to do things too. So thank you. But certainly as far as the cost involved from planning to implementation, that's something we've been grappling with for how to talk about that in housing. And part of our municipal technical assistance grant program that we have, where we give funding to communities who want to expand housing choices, zoning's getting in the way. Sometimes just the cost of anything can be a barrier, or the perceived cost of something can be a barrier, or not realizing that there might be alternatives. So thanks for that. Who's next? Speak up, because I've got two screens here, so I can't see you necessarily if you're raising your hand. So
I'm happy to go.
Okay, Thomas.
Amy Reed and I discussed two things, one of which was there seems to be an excessive saturation of particularly dining establishments promoting their specials and their menus in social media like Facebook and places like that, probably especially Facebook. So is there a way that organizations like Plan New Hampshire can help them promote their specials or events or whatever they're doing, their menus, as an alternative to the saturated social media where they just appear to lose their impact, to help them gain customers, the customer base, or maintain it at least? And the other was, should Plan New Hampshire consider at some point in the year 2021 attempting to have some outdoor events, in-person events, especially when the weather gets warmer, for people who are willing or able to do it?
Okay. Well, for the first one, as far as the menus, that's kind of outside of our purview, but I suspect that you may want to talk with New Hampshire Magazine, and because they're all about life in New Hampshire and restaurants and everything else, and that may be a good place to find to talk, good people to talk to about menus at New Hampshire Magazine. I'm sure that they're looking for other services that they can be providing for all of us. So, and that I think the fit might be better there. As far as Plan New Hampshire having an outdoor event in August, July or August, we are planning to have, we haven't made any firm plans yet as location or anything, but we want to have an event. It's going to be hosted by the board of directors to say thank you to all of our members and volunteers and sponsors and everyone who has really contributed to making Plan New Hampshire be the viable organization that it is. And it's getting livelier all the time, and it's really great. And the board wants to say thank you, and that will be outdoors as of
Good.
right now. So just keep an eye out for how that's gonna play out, because we don't know yet how that's gonna play out, but that is gonna happen. So
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, I didn't have Plan New Hampshire specifically in mind to help promote restaurants or
oh,
anything.
okay.
You know,
Okay.
what resources are they aware of that might be in a position to do so?
Yeah, and that's
Really?
mine. Does anybody else have an idea of, there's a Facebook page called Seacoast Eats, was created this summer. Check it out. Okay.
That's
Yeah,
a good one,
it
Heather.
came
Yeah.
up in the chat. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks to you, and thanks to Amy Reed. That's awesome. Great. Thank you. Who else? We like these ideas. Bob White, did you just raise your hand?
I did.
did.
So I had the dream team tagged with Doug Dowell and Rich Brown. Rich joined us late, and Doug had to step off on a personal call. So
Oh, he's here now.
he,
So
he looks like he's back. Whatever crisis was happening, he
Okay.
is as always skillfully averted it. Yeah, I think the favorite activity of Doug and myself is the Charettes, and so sort of finding ways to sort of reactivate that, and also looking, and then this is a little personal editorializing, is looking for ways that plan can be, continue to place itself in positions of leadership for that. There's bills in the legislature right now going through to help towns better cope with the housing pressures or the tensions and opportunities with housing. There's articles about, that New Hampshire needs 20,000 units of housing. And I just know from my own experience, and I've started to get involved up in the Mount Washington Valley area, is, there's a whole workforce housing up there that is just not present in those communities, yet there's a huge gap.
Yeah.
And if you look at the regulatory frameworks in either the towns of Conway or Bartlett, there's no housing future really happening there.
Right. We have Harrison on the call, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Okay,
that's
so
great.
I'm probably gonna stick my foot in my mouth here, but there isn't, and the opportunity to take sort of mini regions, like Conway and Bartlett, and bring them together in considerations of, because that's sort of the sort of community focus point of where there could be workforce housing, and really modeling it after new neighborhoods. I put up a piece I put up a Strong Towns article about affordable housing yesterday, for basically advocating that it's not about the buildings, it's about the neighborhoods. And so literally overnight, I have 100 likes. That's 100 happy people in Portsmouth talking about housing. So I think that's resonating. That could resonate for how to really approach a philosophical approach to housing that could translate into just sort of regional approaches of maybe more than just one town at a time. And so those would just seem like fertile ground for future Charettes, or putting Plan New Hampshire in a sort of a leadership position around that, providing examples and inspiration.
Thank you. Talk about heavy lifting. That's great. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anybody else? Sharon.
So I was on our group had Amanda Savage and Brian Pratt. We talked about several ideas, mostly focused on education, talking about the state in terms of towns that have assets, historical assets that could be used to connect to tourists, attracting both in-state and out-of-state tourism dollars by capitalizing on assets. Also, we talked a lot about trails in towns where there are a lot of walking trails, multi-purpose trails that a lot of people don't know about unless you live in the town, that could also be tied into the built environment and in terms of economic development and promoting tourism dollars. And also the arts community, again, related to historic assets, all of the other things that there are several towns in New Hampshire that are really doing a great job of attracting strong arts communities build around their whatever assets they have in terms of the built environment, but also are really bringing in a lot of dollars. And Rochester, I think, for one, can't quantify the dollars that it brings in terms of from the arts work that it's done, and some of the preservation of their buildings. So we talked about those things in an educational context.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the historic assets that we touch on those when we go into towns to do charrettes. We do look at their historic assets, and we do look at trails and figure out how those can be leveraged for economic development. As far as the arts community, we're starting to take a look at the arts communities that are popping up and how art and layering art into, and the whole notion of placemaking and creative placemaking and all of that. So yeah, we're right there with you. And then thanks for the reminder and underscoring that, yes, this is important to a lot of different people. So that's great. Thank you.
And another related thing that you've kind of promoted, Robin, natural capital as a concept or a rubric is something that once people get used to it or realize the potential,
Absolutely,
would really be worth emphasizing or educating more about, especially since, and doubly so with the coronavirus, the other kind of capital is getting awfully scarce in my little town and others I know of.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's hard to run a town these days.
Yes, it is.
Very hard.
Yes, it is. So thanks, Rob. Yes, we natural capital is something that being able to really leverage your natural assets that you have in your communities, whether it's a little lake or a river or water or hiking or whatever, those natural resources can be, they're pretty, they can be very important, and they can also be really good economic drivers for your community. I know we've had workshops on that, and I know that Dr. Shannon Rogers over at UNH Cooperative Extension is very focused on that in her work. So yeah, so thank you. Who else?
Hey, Robin, Joe Shoemaker here. We had, there's 3 of us, and a nice cross section from a new board member like myself to Ryan from Liberty Utilities, which is a kind of a new member to plan in his first
sure
meeting.
Welcome, Ryan.
We had Chris Parker, an experienced long-term participant with plan as well. So one of the things that stood out to me was Chris brought up potentially looking at, as we refine and promote charrettes, potentially looking at providing a guidebook on how to run a charrette for those that maybe are in a little bit different position and either just don't have the resources or aren't eligible, or maybe a larger city or town that does have resources, and we could provide some guidance for them to do their own event. So that's we talked about a bunch of great things. I think the feedback was good as far as what we do and how we're doing it, but that one stood out to me.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. A guidebook to run it. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, we were happy to talk to people who want to do their own charrette. So yeah, it's never come up, but we're happy to do that and to yeah. Okay, Camille, you have your hand raised.
I do. I have to leave at 10, so this is good.
Oh.
So we had Harrison Kanzler in our group and Kathleen Porter. One of the things Harrison suggested for new board members is having a cheat sheet that addresses all of these acronyms. If you're relatively new or on the fringes of things, there's so many acronyms with housing and planning and transportation, and that might be just a nice guide to have that many people could use as a resource. Then we kind of shifted our focus on, how the pandemic has changed the housing situation. So one, rising costs, that's an obvious one. Harrison noted in the North Country, there's been a lot more people that have now moved into a more permanent basis, their second home. So that's kind of changing. It's better for the economy in some ways, more students in the school system. But, what do you do about addressing that affordable housing issue, that is just, it's a long-going issue in New Hampshire anyway. And this will probably augment it. And could you focus on, a charrette just on affordable housing options, or more training on housing options and what the design could look like for planning boards, so that they can actually, rather than when they're presented with something, be hesitant about negative side effects from increased density. Maybe, you know, providing a perspective from Plan New Hampshire that is unbiased, that maybe gives them more of a, hey, listen, this is what affordable housing could look like, and a visual with that, so they can have some background education, so that when plans are presented to them, they may be a little more open-minded about it. And Harrison, Kathleen, have something else, feel free to.
Okay.
And
Kathleen or Harrison, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add a little. Just I know
Thanks, Camille.
Robert had brought up the idea of kind of like the regional picture and image and marketing of that type of housing, and that's very much what we are currently working on. But you know, to that end, as Camille just brought up, you know, we did have an ordinance in front of the Conway Planning Board just 2 weeks ago that was for you know, cluster development, kind of cottage court, pocket neighborhood style housing. That unfortunately was voted down. And again, a lot of it was misperception. You know, it was this idea of, oh, well, there were small lots, small houses at the base of one of the local ski resorts, and those all sold for $400,000 or $500,000. That's not affordable. You know, you're right. That's also at the base of the ski resort, so it doesn't really count. And then references to, oh, when you go past Ossipee Lake on Route 16, you see, you know, small houses, small lots, and they're all jammed as close together as they can be. Well, again, that's waterfront. That's different. They're trying to get at a specific resource there, as opposed to just being as spread out on those lots as they can be to facilitate a neighborhood. So that's kind of the image we're trying to fight. And as far as regional, you know, it is tough for our area. You know, a lot of the communities function very differently. Conway, Bartlett, I think Ossipee are really the only ones that have any sort of public works. So a lot of them don't have town water, town sewer. So when it comes to an idea like a pocket neighborhood or things like that, it looks very different. So kind of getting that regional image is tough based on, you know, what the different communities have at their disposal. And so I guess that's where I was coming from with, as Camille mentioned, just kind of this idea more of making sure our planning boards, who a lot of are just volunteers who have some spare time and are interested in the topic, you know, have as much access to basic planning information, basic jargon as is possible, so that when folks like myself or our board members go to talk to them, they are a bit more on point with where we are, and kind of understand a little better where we're coming from. So that's kind of where I brought that cheat sheet up, you know, because as far as getting that regional image, it's pretty difficult when you start getting outside of public works areas.
Okay, I wonder if OSI might have a cheat sheet of acronyms. They may
Yeah.
have one already put together.
Yeah, I'll talk to Noah, and I know that they're also, I don't remember the bill, HB 584 or something along those lines.
Something like that, yeah.
Was increasing the educational opportunities through OSI.
Right.
So I'll touch base with him. But if, and then I'll get back to you and let you know what they say.
That'd be great. Thanks. Yeah. So these are great ideas. Yeah, but I think plan can play more of a role in the housing thing. The idea of having a charrette to show what housing could look like. That's something that a couple of the housing coalitions do. They do their own charrettes, and that's specifically what they do. But it's certainly something we have incorporated into our own charrettes. The other thing is to keep in mind is we don't go to towns and say, we're here, this is what you need to do. They have to apply to us. So, but there's certainly ways I think that we can figure out a way to expand that if that's something that the group wants. I think it's really needed, and you know, housing is such a kingpin for so many different things going on in the state. So this is all just really interesting information. Thank you all. Anybody else? Yes, Rich.
So I'm up in Lyme, an alternate on the planning board here, and somebody brought up the question that regional problems, the fact that the Upper Valley needs 3 to 5 to who knows how many new housing units, regional problems can't be addressed town by town because each town says, it's not my responsibility. It's not my problem. It's made doubly worse by the fact that here in Lyme, we're on the border with Vermont, so half the population lives in Vermont. So it's a whole other state. Does anybody have any notion as to how to, I don't know, foment the belief of shared responsibility?
I think that comes down to my own personal observation. It comes down to the personalities involved and how open the people are, because there are places where regional, the big R word, is actually being considered. I think up in the North Country, it is to some extent sharing, I mean, ambulance services and fire services and things like that. But it is really hard when you're talking about housing because it's a regional issue, but it's local control and it's local zoning. And certainly, I think conversations need to happen. Anybody else that's worked on that? Is Paul Simon still here? He was talking about housing earlier. And whether he's got it, and you're in the upper, and you're in the Upper Valley too, right?
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, I'm next to Rich. I know Rich.
Oh, okay.
So my wife is the director of the library here in town, and I've seen Rich there. So at the library back when it was open. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we do have like a regional school system here as well between Vermont and New Hampshire. I mean, the Dresden School District is what they call it, and that seems to be working okay. But I agree with Rich. I think that, and I agree with what you're saying, Robin, that we need more of a regional kind of outlook on how that approach happens. I think, and just the projects I'm involved in Vermont too, there's this idea that much of what we're talking about is design-based many times, or form-based. They talk about form-based code, for instance, when they talk about, developing some of these ideas. And AARP did a great thing up in Vermont too, where they stressed on that. But I think Robert White mentioned it, is that we can't just talk about buildings. We have to talk about neighborhoods. We got to talk about people, because it, and you mentioned it too, Robin, that it's sometimes we get trapped in our zoning and some of how that written language is, and that can hold things up. What I believe we should get back to is more, this is just my own thoughts on this, is the PUD process, which would allow waivers or dimensional requirements or things to be waived in such a way that because of a better plan should be looked at more. The problem with that is that certain municipalities adopt PUDs and then they still restrict them. They for some reason or another, they still impose certain things that and I've seen that. So I don't know what the answer is, but like I think we do need to talk about it more, because it's beyond just the language of zoning and planning, and we've got to really talk about people. We got to talk about equity. We got to really focus on the matters that are needed. And like Rich said, it's not just your town or the community people in that town. We have to speak for the people that can't speak for themselves, right? So that can't afford to live in that town, right? So how do we do that?
Yeah.
So
sounds like a whole nother discussion. A whole series of them are going to be happening all around, more around housing. We Plan New Hampshire is already involved with, as I said earlier, the Municipal Technical Assistance Grant Program, where we give grants to communities so that they can address their housing needs. And part of that program that we require is that community is a participant in that process, that the consultant doesn't go in and say, this is what you need here, and then vote on it. And of course they're not, because it's coming out of left field. So it's a huge process, and it's one process, but we realize that there's a lot more that goes into it. But that's a whole nother topic that we're happy to pick up at any time with anybody who's interested in talking further about it, and also making a plan of action. That there are all kinds of roundtables and so forth that we belong to, and so yeah. But let's keep this going. We have about just a couple more minutes. Does anybody have any more ideas that they wanted to put out there, or any closing thoughts, or or anything? Because I don't want to keep you all too long, but this has been great conversation and great ideas coming out from this. Anybody else?
Jody had her hand up. I don't know if you wanted.
Jody? Okay. Thank you.
I did, but I lowered it because it was more about the housing stuff.
That's okay.
So I'll get on my soapbox for a quick second. I personally, working in the largest city in the state, I'm so sick of talking about affordable housing, and not because I don't believe in it. I think we absolutely need it. But after we're basically just shy in the city of abolishing zoning regulations and waiving all fees to encourage more affordable housing. But the problem is that nobody wants to build it because it's not economically beneficial to the developers. And I'm so upset with the fact that these local small communities are being tasked with trying to figure out the problem. But if large cities like Los Angeles and Portland, Oregon can't figure out the problem, how can we expect small communities in New Hampshire to figure out the problem? So I think this goes beyond a regional problem, and it's a federal thing. We need federal taxes, tax cuts. We can't expect that we can figure this out, because in Manchester, we can't figure it out. So I feel terrible for the North Country that, they're being tasked with doing this, and they just keep coming up short because we can't do it alone. And
Right.
so that's my little soapbox spiel, that it's not that I don't support affordable housing. I'm just so tired of talking about it.
Yeah, I totally get you. And, and that's a good reminder that we can't. We've been grappling with this for years and years and years. And yeah, so thank you. Good observation. Anybody else before we close down? Anybody? Okay. I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you for all your comments, your ideas. These are great ideas. They're all over the place, but they're all right within what we do and what we're all about. So that's really wonderful. It was great to see some of you for the first time and see some of you coming back, which is really awesome. Next up on March 23rd, there was an announcement that went out yesterday, I believe, or Tuesday, and you'll be hearing about it again, is outdoor dining lessons learned. That's our next webinar that will be available to you. Meanwhile, keep these ideas coming. This is great. And thank you so much for being here. Thanks to Stephanie for being the tech person behind the scenes, the Wizard of Oz. And thanks to each of you for speaking up. I think I'm looking at the screen and I think every single one of you said something today, which is great. So that's really great. So thank you for participating. Thank you for being here. And thank you for supporting in your own way, Plan New Hampshire, because we do this for you and we want to know that we're doing the right thing for you. So thank you so much. Have a great day.
Good seeing you all.
Bye,
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks, Robin.